Here are some art lingo that you might not know about. First one is RKGK, which basically just means quick sketch or scribble in Japanese. So if an artist has RKGK, just means it was a quick sketch. Next, we got WIP or WIP. It stands for work in progress, which means that it's not quite done yet, but they just wanted to post it to let you know how it's going. And then we got COM, which is basically just short for commissions. So if you see like comms or comms open, just means that their commissions are open. Mine are, by the way. And if they post about it and they say com or commission, just make sure you're not using it for anything. And then we got render. So I think this would be considered unrendered. And then this is rendered. Basically just adding colors and shading and shadows. I think sometimes we just like being fancy and say render instead of coloring, but yeah. If there's one thing to incorporate in your art, it has to be this secret shape. This shape right here, just like that. Yep. Like, look, I use it all the time when I'm shading hair, just like boom, boom. It's just always this shape. And even for skin rendering as well, look at that. And then a tiny curved one. And also clothing folds. And specifically, I use this brush and I just taper it a little bit so it's sharp at the end that you can download from here. And extra detailed hair strands like that. Like for all the fabric, I'm using that one shape. Eyes too, like the eyelashes. But honestly, once you have perfected the pressure control and the shape and how you utilize it, you are set. Here are some beginner art mistakes that you should avoid. One of the biggest mistakes is shading where your line art is. You can see here's my line art, but then the shading is like right next to it. So liner and then shading right next to it. And then again here with the eyebrows and the eyelid. And the biggest issue with this is when you don't shade anywhere else. Like there's no shading over here besides only where the line art is. And again here, like there's no shading anywhere else besides the line art. So you can see here's my line art, but I'm shading in areas that are not just where the line art is. So don't be afraid to put shading where there's no line art. Next is to experiment with different face angles. I know we love that like 3/4 face angle. It's like the easiest and funnest to do. But then I think you just end up too comfortable with it and then you don't want to try anything else. So experiment with like bottom up angle or like even a front view. Try like a little chin up or like even a side profile. Just experiment with a lot of different face angles. Next is always leaving a white background. Try to like spice it up a little bit, put some clouds, put like a telephone pole or something. Though my go-to is always clouds just because it's the easiest and it looks the best. And it's so easy because I just use this cloud brush. And I just got it from here. If you just type in that, it's this one that you can just download. Another thing is experimenting with color. So before I loved like a bright saturated color palette, but now I like a more toned down, like beige, white color palette. But then sometimes I still do like a really bright one. Another thing is sticking to one color palette. Just try a lot of different ones and see which ones you like. Because I think colors are really what can elevate your art. Here are some tips to help me achieve that soft Pinterest anime looking style. Number one, it's gotta be a little bit messy. In my old art, you can see I was trying to be really precise with all the liner. I was coloring in the lines and everything just looks very structured. Once I veered away from that and started drawing and coloring more messily, like line art is terribly messy, I think that's when I finally realized that messy kind of translates into soft. And I've said it once and I'll say it so many times, but I think coloring is way more important than line art. And in my case, I learned that kind of a more desaturated color palette works the best for me in achieving this style. But of course, don't let this limit you. It's also super fun to experiment with dark colors as well. Also, make sure you stay away from these questionable, crispy looking line art brushes. Like I'm definitely not a fan of Tinderbox or Technical Pen. I've seen people utilize this amazingly. I unfortunately cannot. So I always use this one from here. And lastly, another small coloring tip, you never want to make the eye whites pure white. Try making it a soft gray. Alright, the fastest way that I color clothes in about 5 steps. Step 1 is flat colors. Then you're going to select the color, and then you're going to make a new layer on multiply. Pick a soft rendering brush. Favorite, absolute number 1 is the Yummy Textured Coloring Brush. And what you're going to do is just make triangular shapes. Look at this. Triangle, triangle. Using the same brush as eraser, just lightly kind of make the edges look a little smoother. Again, triangle, triangle. And don't be afraid to just block in colors where you think there should be shadow, because we all don't know. I'm just guessing, honestly. Again, triangle, 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 triangle. And then again, blocking in random shapes. Don't be afraid to just like go all in. And then play with the opacity to how much you like it. I then do another multiply layer and just kind of highlight the triangle shapes that we did previously. Honestly, sometimes I'm just like, I feel like I'm not even qualified to answer these questions because I'm just guessing. I thought we were all guessing. Honestly, my philosophy is as long as it doesn't look wrong, it's right. And then with another layer on multiply, I just blocked in these large shadows. Can make the edges a little bit softer too. Next, we're going to go in with some highlights, so just pick like a lighter color. Often it goes around the edges of clothing, I think. And then if you remember the triangle folds that we did earlier, you can also put one in the middle, smack dab right there. And if you're feeling edgy, you can even put some random patches here and there, just cause. And I just did the same thing for his shirt. And then I just add a little bit of a blush tone around the areas near the skin. But yeah, that is my unqualified advice on how I color clothes. Also, I did this really fast, so please don't come for me. Thank you. Okay, we gotta talk about layers and how to use them. So whenever I draw, I always use clipping masks. Basically, clipping mask just allows you to draw on a layer without it going outside of it. So we have the hair layer right now, right here. I don't normally label it, I just labeled it so you can see it easier. But if you make a new layer right on top without doing anything to it, you can see you go outside of the hair layer. So to fix that, you go to clipping mask and you can see it automatically just stays inside the hair colored part. Another helpful layer that I use is Alpha Lock. Alpha Lock is kind of like the clipping mask, except it allows you to just do it directly on the layer itself. That's kind of terrifying. But so if you don't want to like keep adding layers, you can just directly do it on this one layer. So you can see I use it all the time. I use it for like hair, skin, or clothes, areas that need different layers of shading because I like to play around with the opacity of every different layer. Whereas if I just had it on one layer, it would act as an entire thing and I couldn't just isolate one layer of shading. And it doesn't really help with adding like more dimension. Does that make sense? But yeah, to really get to know your layers, like in the beginning when I didn't really know how to use layers, like look, this is an entire layer. It just makes it a lot harder to color or redraw just because everything is on one layer. Whereas if everything has its own layer, you could just work on hair itself or on the eye itself or on the clothing itself, yada yada.
Okay, here are some things I wish I knew before I started digital art. I don't know if this is the case for other art programs, but specifically for Procreate, you need a large canvas to maintain good quality. Because when I was starting out, it was about like 1,000 by 1,000, which I think is definitely not enough for me if you want to like maintain high quality even when zooming in. So my go-to now is about 3.8 by 4.8. Okay, next, if you want to do backgrounds, you gotta treat it like a character. I don't know why, but when I started, I had the preconceived notion that like backgrounds are second to the characters, so therefore less time needs to be spent on them. But I feel you definitely need to treat it with the same amount of patience and time and skill and practice as you do with drawing portraits or people. As well, that means using the same brush. And I just use the textured coloring brush or the yummy line art brush from the soft anime pack. Also, a technique I wish I knew earlier is once you're finished with a piece, transfer it to your laptop or your computer or your phone, anywhere where the screen is like bigger or smaller, and it just helps you see it in a new perspective. So if I transfer this to my computer, Jesus, I might notice like, oh, he could have some more color filled in his eyes here, or like his hand looks a little small compared to his body. Like you just notice a lot more things when the sizes are adjusted. So like before I post something on Instagram, I always transfer it to my phone and then see how it looks like on my phone. Be influencing you, art edition. Might be controversial, but I hate posting art on Twitter. Okay, but if you mainly draw from one fandom or one character or one ship, I don't know, then your engagement could be really good. But if you try and branch off and post other things, I literally guarantee you it's going to get way less engagement. I guess it's the same for other platforms, but I saw this most drastically on Twitter. And I think it's mainly because they don't have an explore page and hashtags don't really do jack. Another reason why I hate it is because on Instagram, TikTok, even Pinterest, your posts have a long lifeline. Like I still get engagement from posts I made like 2 years ago. But on Twitter, literally if you blow up and get like 50K likes or something, that post is guaranteed to be like radio silent in like 48 hours. I guarantee you. Okay, enough Twitter slander. Next, you don't need to invest in hundreds of brushes. Literally 99% of my drawings are done with one brush. I like the yummy liner brush from here. Okay, next, you don't need any like fancy screen protector. I've known people who tried Paperlight, and it's supposed to mimic like drawing on paper. But like 3 of my 5 friends said it scratched their stylus real bad. Like, I'm sorry, just save your $60. Like, I literally have no screen protector, and it's like 10 out of 10. The Influencing You Art Edition Part 2. Clean line art is overrated. I don't remember the last time I did like clean, pure line art. I literally used the lines from my messy sketch, look at these lines, and just color on top of it. Saved me so much hassle and overthinking. Yep, messy line art, love it. Of course, disclaimer, it is with personal preference. I know people who love line art, do it beautifully. It was just not for me. But the takeaway is just experiment with your line art. Next, we already established that Twitter sucks, so I offer you Pinterest. I've literally just been reposting my TikToks on Pinterest, not really giving it a second thought, until one day I was like, why do I have 7.9k followers? Like where did they even come from? Also, everyone is super nice, and engagement is pretty good. Okay, this next one might be controversial, but hear me out. Stop using airbrushes to color. I feel like it makes your piece look a lot more clean if your edges are more straight or like clean cut. Okay, this is an old drawing, so please excuse everything. But you can see the excessive airbrushing just kind of makes it look like I don't really know how to shade, which is true. I literally didn't know how to shade. Whereas if your edges are a little bit more harsh, like clean cut, people who see it will be like, oh, they know how to shade. So instead of airbrush, use like a textured coloring brush or even like your line art brush.